Welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me here.
So before starting, we all know that tobacco are killing, okay? That's not a scoop. It's killed nearly about 7 million people worldwide every year, that's right?
Yes, about half of the consumers of cigarettes will die of the results of smoking.
Yeah. And us, because I am a green journalist, environmentalist, I read a report that said that there were more people dying with air pollution each year versus tobacco-related issues, diseases. It's nearly 9 million people dying each year because of air pollution. So there is,
Well,
yeah. This
let's
is.
say, for
I
us,
would
of
like to
course-
say that because we are talking about tobacco, but climate change and even our carbon emission is very dangerous too. So now let's start with PMI, and you're designing a smoke-free future. What does it mean exactly? Smoke-free future.
It basically means a future without cigarettes. And when I say a future without cigarettes, it means a future not only PMI not selling cigarettes, it means no more cigarettes in France, no more cigarettes in Europe, no more cigarettes in the world. That's what we have in mind. And I think you may be thinking, how can this be done? But we have for 20 years been developing better products, alternative ways to deliver nicotine. And we now think since 3-4 years, we can really completely replace cigarettes with those better products within a reasonable time frame.
Did you know that before coming in this session, that Philip Morris would like to stop cigarettes? Did you know that? How many of you have you ever? Some of you.
That's a good surprise. But of course, people don't know the tobacco industry very well, and therefore I think often what is happening is not so much followed. But I'm glad to see that quite a few people heard about it. Yeah.
How does this approach differ from other traditional tobacco companies?
Look, I think.
And you can mention them.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it was about a change in the purpose of our company, which happened about 3-4 years ago. If you look at the new generation of products that we have developed, it's heated tobacco products. I worked with it 25 years for the company, and 20 years ago, we had a first generation of product, total commercial flop. 10 years ago, a second generation, again, a commercial flop. When the current product came on the market, and because I'm in France, I can't mention the brand name, but it is a heated tobacco product. When it started to be used inside the company, we realized this product is really a very good alternative to smoking cigarettes. The people in our company who used to smoke stopped smoking completely, including our CEO, our senior management. And that led to a discussion about what is actually the purpose of this product for the future of our company. Because until that time, I think we somehow assumed we would be selling cigarettes as well as the new products. And if you know that this new product is so much better for the smoker compared to smoking cigarettes, and if you know that the smoker can really stop smoking with this product, I think from a moral point of view, but also from a business point of view, it made sense to completely switch and replace. So what is the difference between the other companies and us? I think 3 years ago, for us, the purpose changed. The purpose became getting rid of cigarettes, making cigarettes obsolete. And I think the other companies today are still in a choice strategy where you basically sell everything that you can sell. And I think for us, it's about, getting away from cigarettes, replacing with a better alternative around the world, basically.
Let's talk about alternatives. So what was the trigger that caused PMI to transition from cigarettes to smoke-free alternatives?
Well, very simply because we could. I mean, I think we would have done it many years earlier if we had known that the product would be successful. And I think what people need to understand is not just about developing a product that is less harmful than smoking a cigarette. It's also to develop that product that smokers like as an alternative. Because you can have the best alternative. If smokers don't like it, they will not switch. What we realized with this product, what we have today on the market, also in France, is that 70% of people who try it, smokers who try it, for about a week period, will not go back to smoking. And I think this made us realize it can be done. So that when you ask what made it change, the realization, now it can happen. Now it can really be the end of cigarette smoking.
And although the health risk of heated tobacco, vaping products like IQOS are much lower than cigarettes. Why not move to them versus a new product segment without the hazards?
Yeah, look, I mean, we don't harm people on purpose. I mean, we make something people like, and of course we would like to minimize the harm as much as possible. So the current product has, in the exposure to toxins is 90% reduced compared to cigarette smoke. And we know from clinical studies that if you look at biomarkers of health risks, it's very similar to people who quit smoking altogether. So we know it's a very good product, but of course we would like to have a product which is completely harmless eventually. And our R&D facilities in Neuchâtel and Switzerland are continuing the research. So next generations of products hopefully will be better and better. So it's, yeah, ideally one day.
That's your commitment.
Well, that's of course our commitment. This is, I think, what everybody wants. I mean, of course, consumers would not like to be harmed, and we don't want to harm our consumers if we can. But at the same time, it's important to develop a product that consumers like. The best thing you can do if you don't want to risk smoking-related diseases is not to start smoking or to quit completely. So it's not a harmless product. But if you otherwise would continue smoking, this is the better alternative.
What is PMI doing to reduce the total number of people using other products to avoid increasing addiction to nicotine?
Look, I think it's to support the message of the public health community that the best thing you can do is not to start. And we are very diligent in making sure that these products are only used by people who already smoke today. So in the development of the product, the kind of flavors we use, the marketing of the product, we make sure that this is not targeting young people, kids, or non-smokers. And in the way we sell the product, we want to make sure that this is only attractive to people who want to continue using tobacco products and not to people who are not using tobacco products today. So it's about how you develop the product, it's about how you market it, but what you also need to do is what we call post-market surveillance. So you need to follow the product after it is on the market for some time. And to give you an idea, it's in 44 countries available today, since 2014 in Japan, which is in Italy, which are two of our main markets. And if we did a post-market surveillance, or we do a post-market surveillance in Japan, and what we know from there is that 98% of people who are using our product have only smoked before. So we know that it's a very small amount of people who have started with this product. And we also know from independent studies done by the government in Japan and Switzerland that it is almost no use by people who, youth and so forth. So we know that we are targeting the right groups, and yeah, that's what we aim to do.
And are you offering smoking or vaping cessation activities to your smokers?
Not today, no, we are not. Our focus is entirely on offering people who smoke a better alternative. And if people, like I said, the best thing is to quit altogether or never to start. And I think governments play a role there, but we don't do that today.
Teen vaping is on the rise, spurred by flavored products. So how is PMI addressing this issue and underage tobacco use?
Yeah, I think it's what you said earlier. I think what I said earlier. I think it's about, if you develop e-cigarettes with bubblegum flavor, you know who you are targeting, and this is the kind of product that we don't make. And so it is, what kind of products and flavors do you produce, and what are your marketing practices? That is, I think, the key thing. And then following afterwards, whether what you're trying to do is also achieving the results. In addition, I think governments have a role to play, but I think first and foremost, companies should do their own job and make sure that they, address the right audiences.
What's PMI longer-term plan to shift to a different revenue stream without inherent hazards, and what is the time horizon for this?
Look, there are 1.1 billion people smoking on the planet.
Yeah, 1.1 billion smokers in the planet.
So it's 1 in 4 people in France, 12 million people in France. There's 1 in 5 people around the world, and we have a 15% market share. So we think, for sure, in the next decades, there's going to be a large demand for tobacco and nicotine products, and offering an innovative product which is science-based, less harmful, I think is going to be a competitive advantage. So I think for the next decades, I think the nicotine and tobacco business will continue to be very, let's say, profitable. At the same time, I think we are transforming as a company from a company producing a relatively commoditized products with a lot of marketing to a more and more technology company. We've hired many scientists. We have in our R&D laboratories people who have knowledge about behavior change, about scientific substantiations. So we are in fact developing new competencies that we can leverage and use in other domains as well. And to give you just one example, which came in the news, which we published a couple of weeks ago, we understand today a lot about consumer behavior and how you can help consumers move to better behaviors, and also about the health risks of smoking versus these alternative products. And so that means, let's say, take the insurance business. We have a much better understanding of what the health insurance cost will be or life insurance cost will be of people who switch compared to others. And so, where insurance companies still charge smokers and vapers the same premiums, we know there is a big health difference. And we are today offering in the UK insurance policies, life insurance policies in this domain. Understanding the consumer, we can develop new competencies basically. And so if you think long term, it's like asking Amazon 20 years ago, where will you be in 20 years from now? I think nobody can predict where you will be in the future. As long as you hire people with new competencies and focus on consumer expectations, I think you can move in different directions.
I think many people often ask you this question, but why don't you stop predicting and selling cigarettes already now?
People ask that every day.
Yeah, every day. This is a stupid question, but I think
it's a very good question.
This is a common question, yeah.
I think, honestly, it's because it doesn't solve the problem. And I give you, if it doesn't solve the problem, if we would stop selling cigarettes today, people would buy cigarettes from our competitors. And I give you an analogy and then I'll explain a bit further. I met a person from an energy company some time ago, and this energy company has gone green. And how did they do that? They sold their coal plants to Chinese investors. And so the company became green, but the coal plants are still there. And for the planet, it makes no difference. And I think, if companies want to really internalize the externalities, they have to take care of this themselves. And so what we are trying to do is make this transformation as a single company. So we are, within our company, shifting resources from our cigarette business to our non-combustible business. 70% of R&D expenditure, 40% of commercial marketing expenditure globally is already in the new business. And if you look at our factories, we have 44 factories globally, and by and large, we are moving factory to factory to the new products. So 7 factories today are producing the new products. So the idea is not to externalize the problem and say, let somebody else deal with the cigarette smokers and let's make ourselves feel good that we are now a non-combustible company. No, it's to replace cigarettes altogether. I mean, the purpose for us is not to just, as a company, sell only non-combustible products. The purpose is to get rid of cigarettes globally.
And how can PMI claim to work on sustainability issues when it's manufacturing and selling a product that, when used as intended, kills half of its users?
Very good question. I think before we had a change in the purpose of the company, we were doing a number of things in the area of sustainability. So we were focused on CO2 emissions and reducing them. We were focused on preventing child labor in tobacco growing, but we were very introvert about it. We didn't talk about it, and that had a good reason. We felt as long as you don't solve the problem of your product, you shouldn't be talking about, broader sustainability topics. So we were doing a lot, we were not talking about it. When the purpose of the company changed in 2016, that's when we started to first time publish our sustainability study and report and talk more broader about what we are doing. And I think, what we also realized is that as we are transforming the product from cigarettes to smoke-free products, the whole value chain needs to transform as well. And there we have some big sustainability challenges and opportunities as well. Our new products use less tobacco, for example. Therefore, there is an opportunity for farmers to grow other crops rather than growing tobacco. And the question is, what is our role to help farmers there? Another example is our new production process uses more water. So therefore, we need to look at water use in the factories. Our new products include electronics, so we need to think about recycling. So sustainability has become more important, and I think it has also become appropriate for us to talk about it since we focus on the key issue that we face.
So as PMI transforms, how Is it responsibly managing the impact of this transition across your supply chain?
Yes, it's what I mentioned earlier. I think take the tobacco growers. I mean, if you see our new product, the tobacco sticks are very short. You saw it earlier.
Yeah.
And some of the tobacco growers would come to us and say, what's going to happen to me? This is only half of the tobacco compared to cigarettes. And I think initially many people thought, let's not talk about it too much. You know, people will resist the change. But then we started seeing actually this transformation brings opportunities. If today 3.3 million hectares of land is used for tobacco globally.
3.3
million hectares.
Million hectares.
If everybody moves to non-combustible products, the amount of leaf needed, tobacco leaf needed, is significantly less. So land becomes available for other purposes. And this is
food, for example,
for food,
for malnutrition.
Yes, exactly. So this is where we started thinking, okay, what is our role to help farmers and connect with other companies in the domain to slowly transition farmers to other crops? And that's exactly what we're doing in countries like Malawi and Mozambique today.
How else is PMR striving to become more sustainable, and what are its recent successes in reducing environmental impact, increasing supply chain responsibility?
Look, I think outside of the product transformation, if you look at, for example, I think climate change is one of the big challenges of humanity. I think all companies need to focus on that.
The biggest challenge.
The biggest challenges for all. And I think in our case, only 10% of CO2 emissions are in the factories. 90% is in the supply chain. It's mainly in tobacco curing. It's mainly in the production of the packaging materials. So our role is to work with the whole supply chain to reduce CO2 emissions. And we have pretty ambitious targets, and we have been, climate A-list for 5 years in a row. So we are very advanced in that area, I would say. Another area where I think we are perhaps a leader is when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We are a company which has equal salary certification globally, one of the few multinationals which has that. We think it's very important that women are more present in management roles and that they are rewarded in an equal way, basically. So those are two areas where I think we are also doing quite a lot.
And how is PMR addressing the growing problem of cigarettes butt littering?
Yeah, I think cigarette butt littering is a big issue. I think many smokers don't realize that if you put a cigarette butt on the floor, you have the risk of animals eating it. You have the risk that eventually goes into the oceans. Cigarette butts are partially tobacco, but partially cellulose acetate, which is a bioplastic. So for cigarette butts, the simple solution, the best solution actually is put it in an ashtray and in general waste, because from an environmental point of view and from a economical point of view, that's the best solution. So it's about making smokers aware and giving them the right opportunities to dispose of the butts properly. With our new product, I think there are new opportunities because the new product doesn't burn, therefore it stays intact as it is. And a lot of users of our new product put the sticks back in the original packaging. And once you can do that, then you can think about recycling and reusing some of the materials. So one test that we have done already in our own offices is to see, can we recycle or at least reuse some of the materials? And it is technically feasible. The question now is it also economically feasible? So that's one direction we are exploring. But yeah.
And my last question for you, and I hope the audience have many questions. So even if your new products are less harmful, like you said, they still contain nicotine, an addictive substance. So what are you doing to prevent youth initiation and unattended use?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the biggest focus areas we have in commercializing new product, which is when you develop the product, do you know that this is attractive to the right audience? Is it attractive to smokers who want to continue smoking cigarettes, or is it attractive to kids? We want to only be attractive to smokers who want to continue using tobacco products. So the design of the product, the marketing materials, it is about the way you sell it. I mean, we don't sell to underage non-smokers. We don't sell to non-smokers in general. So it's all of these things. What is your business ethics in how you apply this on a day-to-day basis? And then monitoring this afterward to see, is the product not attracting kids? And like I said, I think today for our product, the numbers are showing we are reaching the right audience.
I hope they don't attract tobacco anymore. So do you have any question? For PMI, yeah, 2. I would like to show all your hands up.
Thank you. It's very interesting and a barrage of questions, that all of which were very useful answers. Thank you. But I'm also interested in the internal change, because you've done a massive change in purpose. Other companies that have tried that, they've told me things like the board may agree and the people coming in at the bottom agree, but the middle management in the middle, who've been there for decades, love their job, love their brands, no tobacco. How on earth did you take them on the journey?
That's an excellent question, and I think your analysis is also relevant for our company. I think initially, there was in senior management and the board, there was a quick alignment. This is the way to go. I think the millennials immediately get it. But it's exactly like you say, it is for people who have worked their whole life on cigarette marketing or in a cigarette factory and who wonder, what does this mean for me? And I think very wise decision in our company is, this is a transformation we are going to do all together. We are not going to split the company into a good part and a bad part. Sooner or later, we are all going towards the new products. And I think this made it far easier and made the passion in the company very positive on making this change. But I tell you, it's not easy, because the cigarette business is very profitable, it's very stable. A lot of people would ask, why are you destroying a perfectly good business to replace it with something which we don't know? And the qualities that you need and the competencies you need to sell the new products and to develop the new products are different. So it is not easy. I think it's our CEO would say there are 3 aspects of the transformation. It's the product transformation, replacing one product with the other. That's actually the easiest part. There is the external transformation. It is, how do we get support from external stakeholders for this change? Because the cigarette business is a very isolated, self-sufficient business. It's very easy to run. This new business is far more complicated. You need partnerships, you need changes in regulations. So the external transformation and the lack of trust in our type of company is huge. So that is a very difficult change. But the third one, the internal transformation, is almost the most difficult one, which is, how do you bring in new people without disenfranchising people who have worked for the company for many years? And how do you help people make this change? And I think it is about making this feeling of, this is one company, we are doing this all together. Even if in your market you're not selling the new product yet, sooner or later you will. And I think this is what is it. And today we are 4 years in the transformation. I think 95% of employees are fully behind it and enthusiastic about it. But yeah, but it's the most difficult part, I have to admit.
Hello. Here at Sustainable Brands, we talk a lot about brand equity and how to communicate about positivity and stuff. And I'm sure that PMI has a really huge system to communicate, but we also know that the tobacco industry has a huge power, both at the American Congress or at the EU. So does the shift you triggered urges your influence team to go for sustainability and to go for more positivity at the institutional level?
No, absolutely. I think the regaining trust and rebuilding credibility for our company is extremely difficult. And after 20 years of silence, and it's difficult for people to rediscover this company. And I think when it comes to lobbying, it is very important that people know what we stand for and that what we advocate is in line with what we say publicly. So there's no disalignment between what we say and what we do. But you touch on a difficult point, and I think we can only improve by telling what we have what our intentions are, and behaving accordingly. I think that's the only way to go.
Hi, I just wanted to look at the issues from a more strategic level, and it occurred to me that as we're seeing more and more regulation of tobacco, at the same time we're seeing liberalisation about regulations on cannabis. And I know companies in the food and beverage sector are looking at potential new products in that area. So I have 2 questions. First of all, has the tobacco industry as a whole been consulted by governments around potential relaxation of laws on cannabis? And secondly, could you envisage either Philip Morris or some of your peers seeing that as a new product line at some point in the future?
Yeah, I think on your first question, as far as I know, we have not been consulted on the topic. I think the other point I didn't make before is that there is the impression that there is the tobacco industry, like there is the banking sector or the car industry or big oil. And I think there is a differentiation between companies within every industry. And so just like not all banks are the same and not all oil companies are the same, not all tobacco companies are the same. And I think it's one important thing to realize, and that also applies in the case of marijuana. Some of our competitors are indeed in the marijuana business today. So Altria in the United States has made an investment. Imperial Brands has made an investment there. Philip Morris International is not in this business and has not made any plans today. But I do think it's a very interesting discussion because there are two main problems with cigarettes. The first main problem is that half of consumers die 10 years earlier than they should because you burn tobacco and the smoke related to that. That's the problem that we are trying to solve today. The other problem is that you consume nicotine, and nicotine is not particularly harmful, but nicotine is addictive. And so it's more a moral question about, so even if the product were harmless, what about selling something that is addictive? And I think this is where we need to have a more, I would say, rational and science-based discussion on nicotine versus THC versus alcohol and other substances. Because I think today it is driven a lot by emotions versus certain industries or others, and less by facts and science.
It was a good question. Do you have any more questions? Yeah. It works. You speak louder.
Okay. I would like to know if you are working with NGO, which take a lot of time to remove all butts in their environment, like Surf Rider or something like that.
Not yet, but we are very actively focusing on that. Partially it's because of the whole discussion on plastics, of course, and cigarette butts are made of cellulose acetate, and that's a single-use plastic, and therefore covered by the EU directive on single-use plastics. And so we will need to take more responsibility on how do we prevent post-consumer waste? How are the cigarette butts being cleaned up? And
how could you educate people? Yeah, globally. How do you get people to don't throw away garbage? You know.
Well, I think it's first of all. I think a lot of people believe that. I mean, if you ask people where are cigarette butts made of? Yeah, where are filters made of? We did research on that. People believe it's made of paper or cotton. Yeah. And so they somehow believe, I can throw it on the floor, it's not a problem. So first it's about educating what it is made of and that this is not something you should throw on the floor. Yeah. Second, it's about giving the opportunities. I mean, ashtrays have disappeared, unfortunately, in the public domain. So if people are no longer smoking inside but outside, you need to somehow provide them either with portable ashtrays or other means to dispose of ashtrays. And working with NGOs, to come back to your question, is, I think, one solution because I think litter should be addressed also more generally as a problem, not just for cigarette butt litter. But I do think campaigning is something that needs to be done. Yes.
It's an interesting question from a millennial.
Absolutely.
Do you have any questions? I'm sure you will. We have nearly a few minutes. Yeah. Mr. Vinet has a question.
Tell me, do you imagine be able, in I don't know, 10 years or even maybe 2 or 3 years' time, becoming Philip Morris selling, I don't know, of course, sustainable clothes or whatever, very different from the sector you are in today?
Yes, I can imagine that. Not close, to be honest. So we are today in an insurance business. We are in life insurance today as a result of our knowledge development. I think we will be in the direction of the pharma business maybe one day as well, because again we are developing knowledge in that area. But like I said, today the big focus is on, we have 150 million consumers, 7 million consumers have already switched to better products. That's 143 million consumers to go. I think that is our main focus, and I think the passion to give our consumers a better product that improves their lives, that's focus number one. And to give you an idea, in some markets we are really advanced. In Japan today, 4 years after launch, half of our sales are on the new products. Half of our consumers switched. So really, I think the passion that we can feel in the company is about understanding that this can go so much faster than everybody else believes. So that's focus number one. But as I said earlier, I think as we are discovering as we are developing new competencies, yes, we can be in completely new businesses in the future. Who knows?
And just how many of you are smoking in the public? Not anymore.
So this is the other thing. 1 in 4 people in France smoke, and less than 5% in the audience smokes. And the reason, and as a result, many people believe that smoking has disappeared because smoking among well-educated upper-class people has disappeared. So people believe this is a problem that can be ignored, but it is still a big problem. 12 million people in France smoke. And so what do we do for them? I think that's the real question here.
I have a question.
There is a question, yeah.
Yeah.
Many questions.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah. Two things. Firstly, we've got to talk about China. It's all very well talking about the other cigarette companies, and you very eloquently pointed out, Huub, that you're trying to shift the sector, but you can't shift the sector in its entirety with a smoke-free future unless you address the issue of China. That's question one. Question two, I can't remember the exact number that you said about the number of deaths from air quality. Did you say
9
million?
9 million people, yeah, worldwide.
Every year?
Yeah.
So, if your science, you talked about the science, wouldn't that be a thing to get after if you're moving out of cigarettes? Why don't you do something about that problem?
Well, I think in terms of business opportunities, what we are learning is about how can we reduce risky behaviors of consumers. And there are a lot of risky behaviors that people have, and how can we reduce that? If you talk about China, 40% of the global cigarette volume is produced by the Chinese monopoly. So that's the number one tobacco company in the world. And if you look at industry change, I think the challenge that we have today is all companies are wondering, am I being disrupted or am I disrupting? And so that makes it sometimes difficult to cooperate because some companies may don't want to be disrupted, so they resist the change. And I think this is a challenge today.
There is more question there. Yeah.
And I have another question on developing countries. Is then your policy to introduce right away your new products, vaping products, rather than pushing this traditional cigarette business?
Yes, that is what we aim for. I think today the challenge we have with developing countries is that we need to develop a portfolio of products that are affordable for everybody. Our main product today, the name I can't mention, costs about 70 euros the device, and the consumables are a bit cheaper than most cigarettes.
How many consumers are use this new device?
The new
Name
device, in total, 10 million people in the world are using it.
10 million
10 million people, and 7 million of them have completely stopped smoking. For developing countries, we don't think it's the solution for everybody. So we need to develop a broader range of products which are lower cost as well. And we need to also think about different ways, like lending device or renting devices rather than selling it. But you're absolutely right. I think for countries where we are today not present, which is in many African countries, for example, the question that we have posed ourselves already is, should we be entering these markets at all with cigarettes or only with the new products? And I think that's a very good thing you point out. And I think
it's very challenging, yeah. Anyway, we have to think about developing countries, especially in Africa or maybe even in India.
Look, today 75% of our revenues are in the developed countries, rich countries, Europe, Japan. 25% is in developing countries. But our mission is to make the world smoke-free, meaning 1.1 billion people either stop completely or switch to better alternatives. So, yes. But some markets like India or China are extremely protective and closed, so it's difficult, yeah.
Other questions? We can take 2 more questions.
quick question. You just mentioned the 70% in developed countries. PMI and others were known in the past to have lobbied in Congress against regulation and against some of the goals that you outlined. Since 2016, can you give us an example of how maybe your company has shifted and is actually advocating legislation that promotes the goal of allowing people to stop and don't start?
Look, I think, yes, I think the industry and our company as well have lobbied against implementing tobacco regulations in the past and also today. I think some of these regulations we honestly thought and still think are not effective. I'll be very honest with you, I don't think plain packaging necessarily reduces smoking. At the same time, we realize that our opposition to this is creating so much unnecessary, unhelpful tension that it's actually better not to oppose at all. So since 2016, we have not opposed plain packaging on tobacco products anywhere in the world. That's one example. And I think when it comes to regulation of anything, let's say minimum age, banning fruit-flavored cigarettes, all of that we would support immediately. And I think, yeah.
And you, Huub, are you a smoker?
I am not a smoker. You don't need to smoke when you work for Philip Morris International. Although I've tried a few cigarettes and a couple of cigars, it's just not me, I have to say. And I was talking with my colleagues about it earlier today. It's a bit funny, on one hand, to be not consuming the product of the company you work for. Although I'm sure for all of the companies you work for, you may not be consuming their products either.
It won't be the same if you work for a chocolate company,
Exactly,
I'm sure.
exactly. But I think at the same time, I think it sometimes makes you a little bit more objective, thinking about the product and regulation and society. So, I don't know. It's not mandatory to smoke when you work for Philip Morris International.
And we can take a last question. Especially, for this young lady.
Hello. So I was just wondering, there are a lot of people depending on tobacco production. Is PMI planning on helping farmers and producers through this transition?
Yeah, very, very good question. Yes, we buy tobacco in almost 30 countries around the world. 350,000 farmers have contracts with us, and that ranges from countries like the United States, rich countries, to countries like Malawi and Mozambique, very, let's say, poor countries with poor farmers. And our new products use significantly less tobacco, and so we realize this will have an impact on the farmers, and that's exactly why we need to work, especially in developing countries, with farmers to help them to transition to other crops. We had already been doing that certainly in countries like Malawi and Mozambique to help to make sure that tobacco growers do not only grow tobacco, but that they also grow food crops, certainly for themselves, their families, and the village. But now it's becoming bigger, and it's about completely transitioning away from tobacco to other crops. So this is where we have a duty to help farmers, but I think the challenge for us is, the challenge in this change is not so much teaching farmers to grow other crops. It's more to think about the commercialization of those other crops. So this is where we are working and talking to food companies who are interested in other types of crops and how we can work together on that. So yes, it's very important. If you look at our sustainability report, there's a large section written about that, because, like I said, it's those people are your partners, and we will continue to buy tobacco, but in lower quantities than we used to in the past. So we need to think about that.
So thank you so much to the public, and especially to all my speakers, and to my last speaker, Huub. Thank you so much.